It should be going. All right. So here's Justin. Levy, Justin and I think '08. I feel like '08 could even have been a little sooner, but you and I met in person for the first time at some Jeff Pulver event, which was very much like any Jeff Pulver event, always just this crazy collection of misfits. And you and I had like a fairly intense conversation right after that. And then had you come and work with me. At that time, I can't remember all the things you were doing. I think you were working with like one of those shops that like helps you make trophies out of your newspaper clippings.
Yep.
You ran a restaurant. I forget what else. What else did you have going on? Tell me the start.
Yeah. So how all this kind of began was that I was working for a plaque company. If you walk into any doctor's office and you see a top 40 for 40 up on their wall or something like that, that was the company that I was working for. And I started to see what Twitter was in the early days, and you know how it went. Like, you had to text a reply or you had to text a DM. There was no mobile app. And I started to become friends with the people in the Boston area, or the people that we now know that are quote unquote big names. And at the same time, my best friend, who was the best man in my wedding, he was running a restaurant that just wasn't successful. One of the best steakhouses you can ever go to, and was named one of the best steakhouses in Western Mass for a handful of years running. But his advertising wasn't successful because he only had a couple $100, and he was always advertising to the same Pee Wee football or, what have you. So right as the time as I was starting to figure this out and, build relationships with you and people like Darren Rouse over at Pro Blogger and Scott Stratton and people like that, I started to get a little better at this whole thing. And so we started to experiment with it and built a blog with multiple authors on it and built a YouTube channel, which was kind of early in its day of teaching people how to cook and, make a restaurant quality meal, but at home. And that's what started to get on a lot of people's radar, either our friends or major publications like the Boston Globe or Washington Post or places like that.
You started racking up coverage for this kind of stuff before, like a lot of our friends, that we kind of knew from around the way, were still theorizing and hypothesizing. You were executing way back then. You knew that this was a thing. So when you when I convinced you to jump ship and come work with me, and we put together New Marketing Labs and everything that followed, and the Pulse Network and all that, the time was so early for it. And one of the things that we made a decision when we put together New Marketing Labs is we were going to run everything, which meant you were going to run everything. And I was going to try to be a smiling face a lot. And you did a lot of background work to make that stuff run. What was the energy like back then when we got started on this sort of thing?
Well, I think if you look at it all, when we went down to Jeff Pulver's event, you had sent out something, you had tweeted out something offering to drive whoever had wanted to go along the route, right? You were living in Boston. I was in Connecticut at the time. The event was in New York. And I expected that you would have a full car. And so I just figured I'd throw in, because you were at that height, you had just published or were getting ready to publish Trust Agents with Julian Smith. And so I just kind of threw my hat in the ring, right? And I don't know why, but no one took you up on that offer.
Not a soul did.
So you and I had 2 hours driving down to New York and 2 hours coming back. And then we had an intense conversation at a Chili's near my apartment and over fajitas.
Right. Where you taught me how to order a fajita that I still to this day repeat verbatim because of how you taught me.
So, and then I think, once we formed the agency, it was the week after, 2 weeks after, that we, with no common sense, decided to go to CES.
Right.
300,000-400,000 people. We just decided that we'd go try to find business there.
Right. How hard could it be?
And we didn't know anything about selling. So, it was pretty funny. We dubbed ourselves kind of the ninjas, and we had all sorts of relationships there, and most certainly you did. So we were able to get some inside kind of coverage or inside relationships with folks there, and onto the Treasure Island boat, which they never allow. And
That's insanity.
And Brian Solis took pictures for us, and they shut down the whole area. But once we got back home, we had to start to prove our worth. And our first client, because they had reached out to you ahead of time, was Citrix, and one division of Citrix at that time.
Yeah. Go to meeting, go to hell, go to webinar.
Yeah. And, thankfully, Lisa Horner and David Baeza, who are still extremely close friends. David crashes at our house when he goes back and forth from his home in San Francisco for what he does now. They took a bet on us. They didn't have a budget line item for social. They knew that they didn't know anything, and they invited us in. And a lot of that was learning on the fly or taking ideas that we had, and they were openly willing for us to test on them. And
so we did good and bad jobs for them. We did some really fun stuff, some shenanigans, shaved the head one time because you kind of called me out on something I said I would do one time. David decided to shave his head because he got so caught up in the moment. So, we had some fun. We went to concerts. We went to Nine Inch Nails, Jane's Addiction. Yeah. We met Graham. Is it Graham from Sonos at the time? Yep. And he had this other business of kind of like Airbnb for luxury places. So we stayed in that ridiculously pimped place. We've done some things. But it's interesting, really, in a lot of ways, to contrast working with new NML, which became the Pulse Network, and all those other kinds of things along the way, then working for Citrix Online, which is a brilliant move for a few years. Like in my head, it's like 3, and it's probably like 5 to 8. And then on to other projects. Your career really kept going in an interesting path when you kind of switched to the customer side of the equation. Fill people in on a little bit about that.
Yeah. So during all of this, over the kind of 2-3 years that we worked with them, at one point, David approached me and said, if you ever want to come client side, let me know and we'll create a position for you. And at one point at Blog World, which is no longer around, but used to be one of the largest conferences, he and I were having drinks one night, and I told him I'd love to experience it. So we brought me in, created the position and kind of the guardrails around it, and brought me into the division, Citrix Online. And then after working with the division for about 2 years, we created a director role at corporate. And I went on to hold that role for about 5 years before leaving there and moving on to ServiceNow. And then I was there for about 1.5 years until I became a free agent about 2 months ago.
Yeah, so let's transition to that, because number one, it blows. Number two, with all your experience, with all your talent, with all the things that you know how to do, this is a different world right now. And all of that budget got froze. All the stuff you know how to do the most is most of the budget that got froze. So no one's going to be hiring in the next few minutes, but boy, they need you. What's the good and the bad of the job hunt? What's the experience been like? What's it been, besides clearly disheartening that it's still 2 months and no one's picked you up? We'll get back to everything to do with your physical challenges in life. What kept you going from that and every other aspect to be out there and be so positive and to really jam at this and try to get that, that new next gig?
I think knowing that, so companies that are out there, there's no shortage of the need. They just have to take care of their homes first, right? Many companies, especially brands, big agencies, people like this, have slowed their hiring, but still kept their job recs out because they furloughed most of their team members. So they need to bring them back in, but then they want all these job recs to fire, right? So, I got plenty of companies that I had applied to that sent out emails that said, we're pulling this job rec right now, but we're going to keep your information on file once we get our team back in place. Of course, that's frustrating on my end because one priority, which is to get back to work right now, but you understand it from there.
And that's, I think, one thing that set you apart the whole way is that you know what the job does or doesn't need. And as much as it could really hurt to feel this, like, couple of months, it's not like you were sitting around going, man, I absolutely have a couple of months of revenue just sitting around waiting. You at least kind of know why and whatnot. A lot of your friends showed up here. There's Steve Garfield and Carrie, and, Chloe's a new friend that you don't know yet, but you will. Justin, you went through a really fun physical experience one day, a minute ago, and that kind of changed your life and actually put you on. You were like a guy into fitness and all that all along, but this changed everything. You want to talk about when that all went down and kind of what happened after?
Yeah, 5 years ago, it'll be 5 years, 6 years come August. Good God. I went through a very serious incident. I had grand mal seizure while sitting on my couch at home. And anyone that knows anything about grand mal seizures knows that you lose consciousness. So you go unconscious for some period of time. And during that, I ended up shattering both my shoulders. And when I say shatter, I broke both the humeri, rotator cuffs. I lost so much bone that they had to use donor bone to put it back together. I have 2 screws in my upper left bicep. I have fiber wire and some other stuff in my shoulders to hold them together. And so I had to learn how to use my arms again, right? When I was in the ambulance heading to the hospital that night, I told them that I couldn't reach, couldn't hold my hands an inch above my, knees. And I was told that that's from the actual seizure happening. It's like an electrical storm in your body. And that's true. But I knew something else was wrong. When I got to the hospital, I had another seizure there, and we ended up finding out that the reason why those seizures were happening was due to a brain surgery. It was due to a brain tumor. Right. So a month later, I had brain surgery. Over that period of time, I've had about 7 seizures. I've had one on an airplane ride back to Boston, 2 in my office, 1 at dinner in Las Vegas with my former team. And, it's never a fun thing to go through, though, you've kind of learned how to deal with it now. One thing that was really, really nice, and a lot of the people that are here now I know did, was about 12 to 24 hours after it, before I was even really aware of what was going on, because they put me on every drug humanly possible. Chris Penn had set up a GoFundMe type of account, and hundreds, if not thousands, of people donated to it, hundreds of companies. So that was, really thankful, to us, and helped to pay for a lot of the stuff, because though insurance helps, if you look at it before insurance kicks in, my medical bill is over $1 million.
You only need 5 more to be like that 70s TV show. But those seizures, like you say, they're no joke. Not to make it funny, because I shouldn't, but you don't sit cleanly still or anything during those seizures. They're a spectacle each time. Is that accurate as well? Like, it's
yeah. What happens for most people, they'll flail, right? So, their arms will flail, or they'll fall over, or something like that. For me, because I have so much, and this isn't an ego thing, but it's just the truth.
right.
Because my upper body mass is what it is, my strength, my upper body, my body comes together, and this is how I broke my shoulders, and it just kind of snaps back and forth. And that's that first time my shoulders, shot, because my shoulders dislocated backwards, and then there's so much pressure during those violent kind of back and forths of my body that my shoulders, the kind of plates inside the shoulder could only take too much, or so much. And, I was unfortunate with that. But, so that's hard. Medical kind of thinking has evolved to where they don't want people to get near you. The old thinking has been to put something in their mouth so they don't, bite down on their tongue or swallow the tongue. Now they don't want you to come near them, because the mouth can clench down and you won't have fingers after that. So, it's an interesting task. I have, a lot of people in my life, especially my wife, to, thank, because they've all been there for me. I don't know what's going on once the seizure starts. They're the ones that take care of me, until I come back to.
It's a lot came of this. And you find out that you have a lot more friends than you think you do. It's very humbling. That definitely offsets a lot of the emotions that you end up getting to feel. You get to feel a lot of really bad stuff about yourself for free. Like, you don't even have to pay anyone. You're like, I think I would like to find out that my body is my enemy. My brain is my enemy. But you chose not to. And you've been writing on that topic a little bit. I mean, you have your successful Facebook marketing book. Let's not take away. But there's this other book you've been kind of scratching at here and there, on and off. And I haven't heard an update on that. This show's called Catch Up. Catch me up, Justin Levy.
So the catch up is I haven't written a word about it. But,
what?
That's the catch up. But, what happened immediately following, happened that night was a Sunday night. And after having a really fun Saturday, going to see Guardians of the Galaxy and going for a 6-mile walk. And I had just hit a new, PR with a box jump at the gym and things of that nature. 5, 6 o'clock at night on Sunday, I had this seizure. And that night, I just posted on Facebook because I had nothing else to do when I was laying in the hospital bed waiting for doctors. And I posted something like simple, didn't expect this. And I checked into the hospital. And that's what started to garner all this attention, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments and texts. And whoever knew which way to contact me did. People that knew my cell phone number or knew my wife's number, whatever the case. And, time continued to go on. And, when I first met with my orthopedic surgeon, he said, and this was a couple of days in, he said, you'll never be able to work out again. Never. Like, this is done. And, as someone that's worked out consistently for 20 years, it was hard. It was probably one of the hardest punches to the gut I could feel. And so I started to write about this and everything else, what was going on with my days, and every day was something, whether that was 50 words or I think sometimes it was like 12 to 1400 words. And I wrote about that whole experience like 5 months in, for someone who's never supposed to, do anything again, working out wise. 5 months later, I swam in open waters in St. Lucia. 11 months in, I ran my first Spartan race, and I went on to run probably about 10 to 12 of them, including the World Championships a couple of years ago. But I started to document all of this on a website called Built Unstoppable. But at first, it was on Facebook every day, and then eventually transferred over.
Right.
And, by the end of it, there was no goal. I didn't know when I was going to officially end this, but I was on chemo, and when I came off of it, or as I approached it, I started to decide that would be the last day of this daily journal. So by the end of it, by the last day, I had 545 posts in 175,000 words straight that I had built up. Never missed a day, whether I got home from a flight from vacation at 2:00 in the morning or, there's all sorts of things, for the first few weeks, I couldn't hold anything heavier than my phone. Sometimes it took 5 or 6 hours to write 100 words, but that's what I did. It kept me sane. It helped. And, it was a way to communicate. I had people reach out to me and say they were planning on waiting 5 or 10 years to take their dream vacation, but now they're going to take it now. Or,
Right.
They had decided to, start to get, really serious about their, health. And I had friends that would run or do things, not because they need to get more healthy. They were already healthy, but they wanted to
Sure.
dedicate their time to it.
They needed to advance. I think everyone needed to sort of advance the timetables, on everything. Is one of the things that you showed them, is that maybe you don't plan it for someday and you make someday kind of a little closer. So Deb points out you scared the bejesus out of a lot of us. Your journey to wellness is powerful. I ate chips last night, so didn't work for me. I didn't take. I'm still quite stoppable. But you did it. Justin, what from that drives you in your current job search? And what from that drives you in general, how you work so relentlessly when you're working with your clients and customers?
I don't believe that anything is stoppable, right? There just isn't. There are people that deal with things that are quite worse than I've gone through, right? Third world countries where you have women that, walk 15, 20 miles every day just to get a small bucket of water and back. I mean, what I've gone through is nothing. But, I know what it's like to go through 12 hours of surgery on my head and not know if I was going to wake up from that or not. I know what it's like to go through 2 separate surgeries on my shoulders, and recover from all that and beat the odds. I had, one of the top orthopedic surgeons in the country tell me that I'd never, be able to do any strength training again. And like I said, I've defied all of his odds, and, extremely with the Spartan races and Go Rucks and,
Right.
lifting and everything that I was never supposed to do. So if I did all that and continue to do all that, there isn't any blocker, whether that be finding a new job or, I don't name it.
Right.
It'll,
Challenge me.
yeah.
And maybe that should be a subsection of the site or the book, throw me challenges. I'll take them, whatever. Steve Garfield from stevegarfield.com. You may know. He says, what does that orthopedic surgeon say now?
We haven't been in touch for a while, but, I'm sure at some point it will happen. When we finished, one of my last days with him, he had said he never saw what I had went through. And so we actually took pictures of me at different angles, my arms straight up, my arms to the side, things of that nature, because he wanted to use it in a medical journal. He writes often for, Harvard and things of that nature. And he said if he ever got another case anywhere close to it, that he wanted to write for one of his medical journals.
Wow.
And, his brother, if I remember correctly, is a neurosurgeon. So he put me in touch with him. So the two of us actually had a decent professional relationship, or even, starting to, teeter on a personal relationship going through this. But I tended not to tell him as I went through, everything else that I was accomplishing, kind of hide that from the guy that tells you you'll never do it. The one thing he did ask me was, I was seeing him during this period of time, during the year of, getting back to quote unquote normal. And we had recorded me swimming when I was in St. Lucia 5 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked us to send it to him. He wanted a copy of the video.
Sure.
To use with patients and things like that, because he didn't believe it at first. So, it was something obviously I was happy to do it. I don't know. I didn't feel pain when I was swimming. It didn't feel like I had the surgeries, but, and I think, something that I always did, and, something I take away, from everything that I've done. And, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but, I pushed myself in my physical therapy, and, I started to come last during the, in the day, because I wanted to have that opportunity to push myself harder. And so I would go through intensive training. It'd be like, here's the physical therapy, and okay, that's done. Let's go lift. Right. Because I wanted that opportunity to, free opportunity, essentially, in my insurance to lift heavier and heavier. And even if it pushed me to tears, I know that was only going to help me.
So Carrie says, so all you really have to do is do the work every single day. Is that what you're talking about? Why doesn't everybody just do the work every single day? I think it's easy to lose track of that. But you make your tenacity and your sort of will and intentions really stretches across all of the planes of your life. Like I see you as being the best version of the word competitive in about everything you approach. Like, I imagine you're the kind of guy who, like, even your snow angel's better, when you make a snow angel.
I don't see why you can't approach things in a competitive view, right? And, I'm not talking about normal household things or what have you, but, when I was going through this experience, I told myself two things weren't going to happen, two major things besides the working out and some of that. I said I didn't want to be the person, because I was fully committed to bed when I first came home, and I apologize that the sun's coming in through the blinds, but
it's all good. It's kind of a cool look.
And I'm trying to keep my cat away from my laptop, but I committed two major things to myself. One, I didn't want to become that person who was in bed, and here he's coming, so I apologize ahead of time.
That's good. We like an occasional cat visit at your house, not mine.
And when you're committed to bed, you hear the stories about someone that says, I broke my back, and then I became 600 pounds, right? You see the TV shows and stuff like that, and it's not their fault. You kind of understand it. They were bedridden. They got used to someone bringing their meals and their water and everything, but they're committed to bed, and they, just get unruly with their weight and their eating habits and things like that. And and then the other side of that was people that, would get addicted to pain meds and then end up losing their whole family, their mortgage, everything. And they're on the streets. And again, you kind of understood it, kind of didn't. And I committed those two things. That would never happen to me. So even, when days after my surgeries, once I went home, I was in the hospital for 12 days. But once I went home, I would walk up the flights of stairs to my house.
Right.
Even if I could only go 4 steps, 5 steps, next day I'd do 6, next day I'd do 7, until I could walk my dog. And
that dog was very patient to wait all that time to let it all out, but
she was. And since Carrie and Steve, I can see are pinging me. Hold on one second.
See, look, everybody poop on Justin Levy so much that he has to go and mess with his blinds. This is,
and it's still not going to be perfect, but Steve can handle it.
There you go.
But that's all I cared about doing was improving, and that came to fitness, number one. Because over that period of time, I actually lost 50 to 60 pounds in like 6 weeks.
Of mostly muscle, everybody needs to know, because Justin probably had like 7 pounds of fat.
And then, I was on every pain medication imaginable. If you watch one of those Discovery TV shows or something, all of that, with the exception of the illegal stuff. I mean, just everything, because I would be on this one because it was, every 12 hours, this one because it was every 4, this one because it was every 6. And there he goes.
There he goes. Cat butt.
And now he's going to mess with my ring light. But, I started to pull myself off the pain meds. And I told myself, listen, if tomorrow I wake up in a lot of pain, the bottle's right there. I can go pick it up. But if I don't feel pain, I'm going to continue. And because I didn't want to become that person in one of those two situations. And I just carried that on with me forever. It's, I'm not going to become the person who, can't find a job for a few months, but gives up on life, or anything like that. It's, you see those situations, that person ends up on welfare or, and there's nothing wrong with that. I grew up on welfare, but, it just is a downward spiral for that person. So,
I was going to say that. I was going to say we didn't cover that at all because it just does. I never do those "when did you grow up" kind of things. I'm not Mark Maron or anybody. But the narrative arc was you came from a rough life. You came from a not pleasant life. And we talked about that even privately when we were kind of setting up for this thing via messages. Your aunt, I guess, technically, or aunt, depending on where you were raised. And we don't have to go into that, but all I'm saying is that you have to understand that not only did Justin deal with a massive mental ailment, lost, dozens of pounds of muscle that he had spent lots of years putting on, had to relearn all this stuff, and kind of still operate so that he could, still stay really close to not having to get on the dole, as they used to say in the 20s and 30s. It makes the story just so much bigger. It's hard for some people, I think, to then realize that this is real and this is who you really are and this is what you've really done. What do you tell people who aren't ready to kind of buy this story? And I don't mean that like they don't believe you. They're not ready to buy it for them. What do you tell those people?
You can accomplish anything, right? You can accomplish all of this, not what I've gone through. If you can, but, hopefully you don't, I don't wish it upon anyone. But, I've spent my entire life fighting against every odd possible, including my cat. But
your cat is unstoppable as well.
Well, he just lost his buddy. When unfortunately we had to say goodbye to my dog a couple weekends ago, but
because why not throw that into the pile? You're very loving dog.
And I had her.
Thank you, Facebook, for not even showing me that detail. I didn't see that one go by, so I'm sorry to hear that as well. You've really done a lot.
I grew up poor in a gang neighborhood. I knew, a neighbor stopped by our house before he went and beheaded his son. My mom knew a woman that was on drugs, and someone came by her house, and she was the first woman murdered in a kind of start of a serial killing. I never thought I'd make it to college and didn't understand how. DCF was a regular kind of function of the neighborhood. And so I grew up there, and made it out of that neighborhood and into high school, and, out of there into going to a private university. Made it from there to become one of the first 25 people in the country to earn a bachelor or a master's degree in Homeland Security. And, and along the way, unfortunately, lost, my mom, my dad, to two various issues. And, and both of those happened senior year of high school for me. And so just to kind of backdate and jump forward at the same time.
Yeah.
And I grew up during a period of time when, mulatto couples weren't supposed to be together. My stepdad, who I refer to as my dad, because he's been in my life since I was 1, was Jamaican. And my mom is naturally, white. And I was right in the middle of, this hatred, of mulatto colors or mulatto relationships. And whites didn't like that, that someone was dating.
You were receiving the hatred. You weren't feeling the hatred. Yeah. I got really thrown for a minute. Maybe you were both. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I wasn't feeling it, right? Because I was in neighborhoods with every color, right. Hispanics, blacks, everyone. I was in a ghetto. Everyone lives in a ghetto when you're at that, if you're stuck in it, every color. But generally speaking, with family and things like that, they look down, especially on my mom. And I told you this kind of story, but, when my mom got married to my dad, her family disowned her. And because they couldn't see through that. They didn't care about love. They cared about color. And when she passed away at the funeral, they came up, my mom's sister, and we're sitting in the front row for the funeral. And she reached over and gave me a thing of cash and told me never to contact them again. And I haven't, nor do I care to. And, you know, so that wasn't that long ago, all things considering, 20 years ago or so since college,
Right.
10 years ago, something like that. So, yeah, I've been, you can jump 20 years later and see what we're in the middle of now.
Right. And that's an interesting storyline insofar as you and I have varying degrees of relationships and friendships and appreciation with people in police forces, people in the special operator community, people who have served in one of our armed forces or another, and generally very positive things to say about those people that we know in that space. It's been a little tricky right now to throw that one out there, given what's going on with the brutality and with everything else happening. It's a strange time for you. You were in an interracial relationship. Mulatto is the term at the time. It always was. And it was a different time where for you, it was a lot more vivid, but now it's like on the world stage. Do you want to talk just a minute to that?
Yeah. I think that there is I don't think there is a lot that's being looked at from an interracial marriage per se. You are seeing a lot being addressed in the law enforcement community, or, businesses and individuals, because of this Black Lives Matter, obviously, movement and things like that. One thing that businesses need to understand, and I think that communities are demanding out of this time, hopefully, and maybe not previous times, is that, they need to address it. There is no more saying something and then a few, weeks later, kind of letting that crisis go into the back. Communities have finally said enough is enough. They are starting to speak with their dollars, whether that's politically or, where they might give businesses money. You're starting to see a lot of companies step up and say that they will only buy from companies that, have a more diverse board or a more diverse, executive leadership team. And I think we're going to continue to see this. This is just the start of a much larger movement. And, when you think about that, it is as simple as other, races matter. It's, I grew up around, many, it is what it is. And, I know I can say that, and, a lot of us can say that as being someone from essentially privilege, but, I know, like you said, a lot of people in the spec ops community, and law enforcement. I've been, around, when I was going through my master's degree, and during Goldbrook, people that couldn't tell you where they were from. They could only say that they were at a 3-letter agency.
Right.
And so, that can only mean a few things. And I was very close to going into one of those 3-letter agencies, had gone through most of the recruitment process. But that wasn't because of, my race. That was because of a skill set. And that's what we need to look at, is not hiring for a race or a gender or, sexual preference. You need to hire for the skill set and not to meet a number or to check a box or anything like that. And I think that's what's going to be important too. Don't just hire for a race to be able to say Black Lives Matter to your company. Take a step back and really understand if you are a diverse business, and speak to, how you can. We've seen positive. We've seen a lot of positive. What we've seen also was over the weekend, the massive fallout from CrossFit. The CrossFit CEO made a very, off the cuff and insensitive tweet. And then an email bubbled up because of that. But that brand has just almost quickly imploded on itself. You've had all of the top athletes who make it what it is leave or kind of step back and kind of pause what they feel. You've had two of the largest sponsors being Reebok and Rogue Fitness pull out. You've had, just, all the negative attention towards it happen. You have gyms, which they consider boxes, disaffiliate, with the largest one being around here, NC Fit, which has about eight of them, and then kind of worldwide kind of programs, corporate programs, and things like that. That is the exact wrong thing. And you can't just come out with a press release afterwards or a series of tweets and say, I'm sorry.
Whoops.
Yeah.
That whoops didn't quite work out. Justin, I'm kicking you to the curb. I think we could keep talking for a much longer time. But I feel like we've hit a bunch of the notes, and I think that I think people are they're so quiet because I know they're processing too. Like, I totally understand what's going on. They're like, whoa. Like Carrie pointed out, and she's, being funny and loving at the same time. She said, she goes, I say this with love, Justin, but your life's like a country song, up to and including, and the dog died. So it's the worst, Justin. But look at the smile and look at who you are and how much you matter. And clearly everyone came to see how much you matter. Thank you for coming. Thanks for being part of Catch Up, the only show that comes in a bottle. And I appreciate it, man. I appreciate catching up. It has been quite a minute since you and I have talked. So it really, really was catching up in a lot of ways. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, as I kind of can see in the sidebar, for kind of everyone that showed up. With the sun starting to come up, here, it's 7 o'clock. Well, now almost 8 o'clock where I live, and the sun comes up on this side. So I'm sorry, Steve. But, thank you for everyone that showed up. And I think the last time we caught up was when I was in between jobs. So,
maybe that's just what we do. That means that in my mind, I would like to not catch up with you again for like about 8 years. I think a good long run would be useful right now.
Well, thank you guys.
Carrie says she'll send you a lamp, not realizing there's a ring light facing you right now. But
there is a ring light right here. Unfortunately, the sun is right there.
A little more powerful, even though it's a little further away. Justin Levy, thank you so much. Really good chatting with you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm hitting the button.